Hello, I'd like to welcome you to the Power of Our Story. And today we have retired Lieutenant Colonel from the United States Marine Corps, Rick Wolfe, who is the founder of Soul Survivor Outdoor. It's great to have you. I've read up on what you're doing, and it's a wonderful nonprofit that you're just serving our active duty military. So Rick, tell us about yourself.
Well, first, I just want to say, Sarah, thanks so much for having me on here. Getting the word out about what we're doing is super important, and this is the one of the many ways that we can do that, and we just really appreciate that, or I do. So, thank you so much for the time this morning to do that. So, but yes, a little bit about myself. I served 29 years in the Marine Corps Reserve. Quite a lot of that was actually active duty. At the beginning of my career, things were somewhat, at the very beginning was the first Gulf War. So that wasn't exactly a sedate or calm time in the nation's history. But then there was a bit of a lull in there through 9/11. And so, I did things. I went to places. I was in Somalia. I was in, the desert of California, and also in Okinawa, and did some of that kind of stuff. But it was pretty routine. I would say, the law enforcement and fire, their jobs are a lot harder, a lot more risky on a day-to-day basis. And my job I just felt like it's a job. It's something I do. I'm proud of it, but didn't seem to be particularly risky on a day-to-day basis. And of course, things changed a little bit as time has gone on. And so, I grew up in Colorado. I mentioned that when we were talking before we hit record, and north of Denver, and went to Colorado State University, where I met my wife about a little over 36 years ago. We have, busy family. So we have three sons, 26, 24, and 16. And, so we've got all the normal stuff that everybody else has going on in their lives, in addition to being military and married, and, day-to-day challenges of, relationships and all that kind of stuff going on. And so I was a communications officer in the Marine Corps, so IT. But as a reservist, we lived here in San Diego County for the last going on 32 years. We've been here a very long time. I've been a few places. The family has mostly been here, other than our vacation travels and going to see family and things of that nature. And my degree is in horticulture and landscape design and construction. So, half of my life was spending all this time in the IT arena of the Marine Corps, and the other half was designing, backyards in San Diego County, where people were willing to, drop $500,000 or more in a very small space. And so, kind of a dichotomy, really, the design guy. I was accused of being a basket weaver by Marines. We're all kind of rough on each other and sarcasm. So, like, what's your degree in? Basket weaving or something? And so that's kind of the background. That's Colorado State University, where I did that. And then we've lived here all that time. And so Soul Survivor is what I do now. And that kind of brings me to your questions, and it's easiest just to read them. But you said, what happened? How do we even get to where we're at on a conversation this morning, talking about Soul Survivor Outdoor? And hopefully, pause long enough here and there to let somebody else say something. But what happened, in the context of serving on active duty, one of my jobs on active duty was actually taking care of or facilitating the transition of wounded Marines. And so I was in uniform. I was on full-time active duty. And for a little over a year, I had Marines that had been primarily wounded in combat. I did not have a population group that had suffered horrific injuries, meaning, at least as far as external horrific injuries, I would say internally, yes. But I did not have people with amputations or things of that nature. But I did have folks that had been, shot with an AK-47, perhaps more than once, who would make mostly a full recovery, but wouldn't really be able to serve on continuing active duty in the Marines. I also had folks that had some pretty significant war wounds, soul wounds. You can call it post-traumatic stress. You can add the D on the end if you want to or not, but really impactful things that were going on in their lives. And that's what happened. It's like, okay, wow, there's a lot of the really rough life happening here. And those folks had, as a result of that trauma, their lives were a wreck. And I would say that in addition to the physical and mental things that had occurred, there was more going on. Yeah, because it came back and they were wrecking their families and they were self-medicating, and sometimes with Navy medicine, sometimes with alcohol, probably sometimes with other things that we weren't finding out about maybe, but they were just a disaster. And that made me think, okay, what effect did that have on me? Well, it really started the wheels turning in my head. Like, okay, a lot of people are addressing these issues from many different vantage points. And is there a way that we can perhaps get to some root causes of what the heck was going on with the foundations of their lives, that when the storms of life came, that they weren't just only impacted, and I have to be careful about saying words like only and just, because that's not to minimize what's going on, but there was more happening. And so, I felt like there was a root cause, a foundational issue that was missing. And the military has always had chaplaincy and things of that nature. Our unit took a holistic approach and said, we're dealing with mind, body, spirit, family, medical. So the spirit component was in there. And that could involve chaplaincy or meditation, or, hey, we've got spirit, how about you? The whole gamut of spirit component. And at one point, I thought, well, wouldn't it be awesome to do outdoor adventure stuff, have kind of a fireside chat, and maybe bring a chaplain or another service member out there that had a perspective of spirituality into the equation. And I say all that because that's where it brought me to where we're at. And then just so that no one misses, ultimately what we do is, though that was kind of the crucible or the formative experience for me personally, and say, hey, what happened? Soul Survivor Outdoor does not do anything with veterans, with specifically wounded people, with specifically, post-traumatic stress. We know that we have those issues. We know that people come to our events that have that, frankly, sometimes because the warfare that they endured was at home before they even came into the military, because of some of the family situations and things that people have. But we serve active duty, and no predisposition to wounding or what have you that we're aware of. We're just opening it up and inviting everybody to participate. And then we're a Christian organization and doing it outdoors. So, rewind a little bit, go back to the Wounded Warrior Detachment thing. We did manage to have about 3 different events over a period of that year. And we went outdoors. Joshua Tree National Park was really close. We started with some really basic stuff, like we don't even have a cook, but we have burgers and hot dogs, so somebody ought to grill them. And then we had a legit fireside chat where there was a fire pit, and senior Marine or somebody said, hey, let me tell my story. And a little bit like what we're doing today, but outdoors. So let me tell my story and how my faith came into that, and how, I was a wreck, and I'm not sure I was even going to be able to serve anymore. And oh, by the way, then Christ was a key component of that. My salvation story worked into that, and we had an Army Ranger share his story. By the way, my particular group was all men. That's just the dynamic that I had at that moment. But the battalion that I served under had men and women in it, but I only happened to have men. So we had an Army Ranger share his story. We had a Navy commander share his story. And then we had a Marine Corps Master Sergeant share his story. So we didn't get to the Air Force or the Coast Guard, but we had kind of a good mix of people share their story, and they all had faith stories. So we had an outdoor activity, we had a meal together around a fire pit, and we had a service member who had kind of been there, done that, share their story and how how faith was a key component of foundation, so that when they encountered these difficulties, or maybe they encountered these difficulties and they had no faith foundation, and then they got their life kind of ship uprighted by saying, where does faith fit into this? And does God have something bigger to say about my life, my military experience, and everything else? And then that set things on the right trajectory, at least. Nobody claimed to have it all together. I don't claim to have it all together. None of it. We continue to do this today in the same basic formula. But when our commander said, wow, that's the best spiritual, physical thing that I've been to in 2 years, I thought, well, that can't be right, because, he's commanded a unit that spanned from Quantico, Virginia, near the Pentagon, all the way to Japan. He can't possibly think that this is that impactful, but he actually did. And I thought, well, can we do this with active duty before the wheels of their lives kind of fall off, or the issues of life, which are a myriad, right? I was wounded in combat. I wasn't, but that might be somebody's story, or I've been divorced, or I'm in the midst of divorce, or my Labrador that I've had for 12 years is about to die, and that's my buddy. And, so trauma takes all forms, right? So, or I was abused as a child, how do I reconcile that with my life? And then we're dealing with the active duty military. So all of those kinds of things factor into it. And then we're pointing them towards, having a sure foundation. And so that's what we do today. So now we have, about 12,000 active duty that have come to free events for active duty that are typically a day, no longer in duration. They range from rock climbing to horseback riding and skydiving and skeet shooting a couple of days ago, and a different kind of rock climbing in Colorado a few weeks ago, and surfing, and just getting them outdoors, having a discussion with other military service members or veterans. That's where the veterans will tie into it. And that been there, done that story, and pointing them to the fact that, there's a foundational issue here for each one of us. We're all sitting either on a deck in Oklahoma or in a building that has a firm foundation, hopefully. But what's the firm foundation for our life? So that when those storms come, how do we respond? And so that's really, it in a nutshell. And I can, share more, but I should take a deep breath and then let you guys jump in and ask some questions about what we're doing.
Rick, thank you so much for sharing. I think the thing that got me really excited about this whole thing is how proactive you are.
Yeah.
I mean, just, you think for so many people, the transition process in and of itself is traumatic. So for you
absolutely.
to kind of give them, space to have this R&R, have this soul repair, as you put it, in your write-up, and then just have the body active to be out in nature, storytelling with people who get it. I mean, it just sounds wonderful. It's just wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, we know that, look, we're a Christian organization. We have a Christian worldview and all that, but we also know that everybody comes. And so, yesterday we had a Norse pagan, and, he had a beard. He happened to be kind of redheaded. So, he may have come from Norwegian descent. I don't know, but we have, Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Norse pagans, everybody's coming. Viewpoints on gender, everything, politically speaking, everything, and so we have our viewpoint, but we're open arms to everybody to come and share. And then, because we're climbing rocks and making it maybe a little challenging, taking them out of their comfort zone, there's kind of something for everybody. And our platinum standard would be that, they got outdoors and maybe developed a new hobby or thought about doing something else outside. that they embraced our perspective on faith, and that we believe, Jesus came and died for our sins, and, he died for yours too, and rose from the dead. And that's a component of what we talk about. But again, we won't chase you down and knock on your door and come wrangle you. We won't put you in a headlock to hear our conversation. It's all there. And so, yeah, we've been able to be proactive and go and do things. And, literally a day doesn't go by where a military unit, a senior ranking person, or somebody else in the chain of command, or even a chaplain, and it's kind of a mixed bag, won't engage us and say, well, how do we get involved in this? We say, well, be a squeaky wheel, and as long as your attorneys or somebody else doesn't say you can't do it, you can't receive it, then we're going to engage. And so started with the Marines, and now we've served Marines, sailors, soldiers, coasties. Haven't gotten the Air Force yet. We're working on it. So yeah, pretty cool.
That's great. That is great. And I can see the connection with Mighty Oaks Foundation, because they're a Christian foundation.
Yeah.
But they're, it's definitely inclusive.
Absolutely.
It invites all faiths, and so many people get so much out of it. It's just beautiful principles being applied. And so that's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I want to open it up to Scott and Carrie also, if you have any comments or questions.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Sarah. Rick, if you want to attract some folks in the Air Force, you might start out with like a golf event. That'll get them outdoors. So I know you understand that, but
absolutely.
Hey, this is great to hear. I mean, I've seen what you're doing on LinkedIn, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a pretty good presence on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic that you're spending your time doing this for folks for all the right reasons. Did you say that you have served how many folks now? How many?
About 12,000.
Wow.
I try to keep those numbers fairly up to date so that I'm not providing disingenuous information. But
right.
Yeah. And then this year, I think as of this week, we had events in Tucson with soldiers from Fort Huachuca, and then we also hosted soldiers from Fort Hood at a horseback riding event in Waco. We actually have another, believe it or not, another Marine Corps Master Sergeant who actually runs our stuff in Texas. So I don't know what the story is with so many Marines leading things in the arena of spiritual stuff. Usually we're breaking chairs over people's backs or doing crazy stuff, but yeah, so I think about 1,500 active duty so far this year in 9 states. And then that 12,000 would cover about 12 states. And we have a permanent presence in Tennessee, Texas, and California. And then we kind of splinter off into different directions from those locations, and have even hosted some soldiers at Fort Wainwright, which is in Fairbanks, Alaska, about a month and a half ago at 2 or 3 events. So that was a little more challenging because we don't really have a permanent presence anywhere close to Fairbanks.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, that's tremendous. I didn't know that your reach was that far. That's incredible. That's good to hear. I know, and I didn't catch this, but you're a nonprofit, is that right?
Yeah, we're a 501c3, and we stood up at the end of 2014. But that was mostly our paper shuffle, and then we submitted for 501c3 in February of 2015. And, usually the government moves at the speed of about a glacial kind of thing. But believe it or not, we had our IRS 501c3 determination letter back in 6 weeks from the point of it being sent and the time that it was received. We had it back. And so, there have been a lot of little, I'd call them miracles, that have kind of kept us going. Because at the beginning, it just seemed like, well, maybe I'm, I think my wife actually thought this too. Are you going through a midlife crisis? What's happening right now? Go back to landscape design and construction. That's what not nonprofit work. And so, those kinds of things kept us going, because we would say, well, gee, is this the right direction? And then there'd be a letter in the mailbox and we thought it'd be, you're rejected, fill out some more paperwork or something. No, you're accepted, and here's what it is. Yeah. So.
All right. Yeah, I've been in the nonprofit arena for a while, two different nonprofits, and yeah, I can attest that's that's like light speed for getting that approval that quickly. And in the nonprofit sector, obviously you rely a lot on people that volunteer. You rely
Yes.
on people that give money, and then sponsors. I guess this is kind of a opportunity maybe to give a shout out for some of your good sponsors, but who are some of the folks that are doing that for you?
Yeah, so some really key, the first one would be Mighty Oaks Warrior Programs, and you can look them up either that way or Mighty Oaks Foundation. And Chad Robichaux is their founder, and Jeremy Stolnecker is the executive director. I tell people they're like our Kickstarter, because this thing that we started at the end of 2014 was a full-time job that was the full-time job that got done at night and weekends and everything else in order to get it off the ground, but was unpaid while I did other stuff to get to that point. In 2018, I really felt like for any number of reasons, which I can't get into all of them, but I kind of felt like God was kind of painting me into a corner and saying, hey, go do this. I didn't hear from him audibly. I'd have to go check myself in at the VA today if I told you that. But I said, I think we really need to jump in with both feet. And Mighty Oaks, Chad came to us and first said, well, maybe we should roll you up under Mighty Oaks as a sub program. And then he said, that's probably not the best, because it might restrict what you're doing and we might put too many controls or something on you. So tell you what, why don't we write you a check for $25,000 at the beginning of 2018? So they did that for about 3.5 years with the intention of not continuing with, and that's also a little unusual for a program that does some kind of, in some ways, similar kinds of things to us, but to give that sum of money, about $87,000 to us over 3 years, to do that. Something called the Suha Foundation, which is in Hawaii. They've been very involved for the last 3 years. Something called the Harbaugh Foundation, which was in Rancho Santa Fe, California. And the director of that has moved to Tennessee since, but that was a family, not related to the football family, but a family in Rancho Santa Fe, California, where I think Bill Gates has a home someplace there. So there's some people with some pretty significant resources there. They've donated tens of thousands of dollars to what we're doing. And then Amy's Legacy, which is in Minnesota. And then the Christian Broadcast Network has a sub-ministry called Helping the Homefront. Their goal is really just to do good work in the name of Jesus, and they literally have no strings attached. They mostly do benevolence in terms of like helping active duty service members with home repairs or emergency travel, or fixing a van or buying a new car or something, of that nature. And I approached them several years ago and said, would you be interested in event-driven kinds of things with active duty? And their initial response was probably not. And then they found out the kinds of numbers and the kinds of impact that we were having, and they said probably so. And so they started with about a $25,000 donation, and last year was over 100,000. I mean, these are big numbers because we're spending $500,000-$600,000 a year to do what we did, and we've grown from 2015, where we had a single event with another partner, that's where I met Mighty Oaks, at Camp Pendleton in California. And we had 10 folks there. We had 10 people there. We took a few of them paintballing and skydiving. And I thought, wow, this is a major accomplishment. And I think our total donations that year were $5,000 or $6,000 or something. And it's grown from that to where it's just gone on this crazy trajectory. I'm very cautiously optimistic each year. I don't forecast, and organizations ask us to forecast, well, what do you think you'll do next year? And if we did 500, then I'm going to say 6 or 550, and it may well exceed that, but you just never know in the nonprofit sector. So it's been, military term, right? Explosive growth. It really has. and it's gone like this. And it doesn't seem that there's any turning back, but we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. So I was the one and only employee in 2018. We have five, is that five, four now, and looking at hiring a deputy director to come alongside me and do some of the things that I do. And he actually lives in Colorado. So, and we have a board that's spread across the country. A mixture of civilians that have never served and those that have served. And Chad Robichaux from Mighty Oaks, he continues to be on our advisory board, and some other key individuals that help us be seen and grow carefully, and go from there.
Yeah, that's incredible. It sounds like you're hitting all the right wickets. The right folks have become involved, and it is a numbers game, right? Even on the nonprofit side, you have to be able to show results, and it comes with data, and that data has to back up, what you're doing. And when you show those numbers, they were like you said, they're like, whoa, okay, yeah, we will support that.
Is that really true? Like, that doesn't sound right, Rick. Are you sure those numbers are correct? It's like, I stand in the middle of some of these things, and even as the founder, I'm blown away. Like, okay, is this actually happening? Because, it's one thing to talk about this stuff in an office or a beautiful outdoor space and think, oh, we're going to do all this stuff. It's another thing to have pieces, and we work hard, but I would say the return on investment, this is why I think it probably is a God thing, where it's like what we put in and we work very hard, but I believe our net results are bigger than our inputs. Well, humanly speaking, that's not really possible. Life doesn't work that way. Our ledger sheet shouldn't work a certain way because the Excel spreadsheet says it should look like this, or QuickBooks says it should look like this, and yet it exceeds that. And this stuff is available on GuideStar. You can go on GuideStar and look up Soul Survivor Outdoor, and you can see the results. And then they pull in data from the IRS, from our IRS 990 paperwork and everything. And that's all very academic. And some people care about that, and others are just super passionate about what we're doing, and they're not nearly as concerned about that. But for the people who say, well, what are the results? And are you, and we're at about 80% towards programs. And frankly, being in the nonprofit sector, if we're being honest, some of that's even subjective. Does the gas that goes into a car, is that a program expense? Is that an admin expense? where do we track that? But we work really hard. Having had a top secret clearance in the Marine Corps for 29 years, and all of the really I's dotted and T's crossed thing really comes in, sometimes in bad ways, for my own stress and anxiety stuff that I deal with. But in the good ways, we work really, really hard to report what we actually do and account for every penny. And, I've got a couple of silly envelopes here with cash with like $10 in them. And then that has to go to the bank and be deposited that way, because it needs to, and the guy's name and address, because, it needs to be accounted for. And we want to be super accountable to everybody as we do what we do.
Yeah, boy, if I didn't know you were Marine, I would ask you, just listening to that. Hey, attention to details, man.
Yeah.
Hey, I've been talking enough here. Rick, God bless you, man. What you're doing is incredible. And, the other part is getting people outside and reconnecting with nature. I mean, God has that there for a reason, and we get so sidetracked with our technology and our problems. And when you can slow down a bit and see what nature has to offer, and what God is trying to show us, that's a great time. Thank you, man.
For sure. And our partners, we have we have the whitewater rafting company outside of Colorado Springs that they see the world the way we do. They're a Christian. They're not a nonprofit, but they hey, they're like, this is an avenue of ministry for us. We also have the rock climbing guides, and I put a shout out to Cliffhanger Guides of Joshua Tree National Park. Those guys are awesome. Our logo has a rock climber on it. That's the first thing we ever did. And we're going into our 9th year of partnership with Seth and Sabra from that company. They're not Christians. They see the world very differently than we do. We love them. I mean, they see it differently, and politically, religiously. We see things in completely different ways. And yet The tough Marine, if you're going to get teary-eyed, it's like, hey, I love you guys, and we really do. And they are part of our family, and the network that's growing to be able to make this happen. And so, and that's part of it too. It's like, it's so easy to get into the yes or no, sir, yes, ma'am routine and be so stressed out and so maxed out all the time. And that's not us. We handle things professionally. We hire that guide service has all the right certifications and first aid and first responder and all that kind of stuff, because they do our heavy lifting with rock climbing. But they're part of our family. We love starting up the rock climbing season out at Joshua Tree. One, because we like to rock climb, but two, probably actually ought to be one, because we love Seth and Sabre and their whole team. And so, and that's the same thing with our skydiving outfits, whether it's Go Jump Oceanside or Skydive Elsinore or Skydive Arizona or Coyote Springs Sporting Clays in Tucson or Brazos Bluffs Ranch in Waco, Texas. And I know I'm forgetting somebody, and they're going, why, Rick, why didn't you give us a shout out? But Noah's Ark whitewater rafting in Buena Vista, Colorado. These are just amazing folks that are partnering with us to make this happen.
Roger that. Yeah. West Coast Marine Corps too. There you go.
That's right. Absolutely.
Hey, everybody. I just wanted to say hi, if I could, for 1 second, and just
welcome.
I just want to say, I'll start my video here. Sorry for joining in late. Rick, it sounds like you're doing what every vet is missing. And I explain this to people. When you get out, we're used to being worked hard. We are working animals as veterans. I mean, we like to sweat, and we like to go hard, and we like to fellowship with our other vets. And when you get out, that's gone. It's ripped away from you. And you almost don't know it's gone. And you almost don't know what you're looking for. And I just think it's a beautiful thing you're doing there, Rick. And I want to say thank you on behalf of myself and all the veterans, that you've served and we've served. And I appreciate what you're doing out there, brother.
Well, you're welcome. And, we don't want to have it any other way. Just keep marching and keep doing, I look in the mirror sometimes and I go, you're too old to be jumping out of a plane today. But we're still doing it, and we're still landing it safely. And so, we're going to keep doing those things when we can.
And I don't know, Kevin, if you heard this, but they're actually very proactive in that they are doing it before transition. They serve, active duty, give them time for R&R and all this wonderful stuff that Rick talks about. And all those open doors. I mean, it's wonderful. Like, just even you sharing about the integrity of the organization. I mean, you're obviously very highly trusted. And then, for these doors to open so much for people to freely give to you, they clearly trust you. Do you have any, or before I ask you a question, Carrie, did you want to comment or question or anything?
Of course.
All yours, Carrie.
Hey, Rick, I want to say thank you for what you're doing. I definitely want to say I admire you for using your gifts and talents for our community. I think it's very important that we do that, and you have a variety of different gifts and talents that you can use either way for our community, and that's vital. I'm not surprised that commander said that this was, a spiritual opportunity, because, just like Scott said, we have become so disconnected as a community, personally and professionally, and what we're really lacking is spiritual leaders. And so, you have this faith-based Christian organization that you're utilizing as a motivation. I think it's amazing, and it's empowering that you've got great contributors from the beginning. I'm actually going into this realm next year. I have started buying climbing gear. I haven't done this for years, but I've got a buddy that does it, and we're actually going to start this small venture in Arkansas right up the road here next spring. And so you've given me just even more hope for what I do. I've kept my nonprofit really, really small and low key just because of my past experience. I had a restaurant, I was doing $1 million a year. We fed 2,000 people a week, and it was just like, after doing all of that, it's like, how can I do make the biggest impact with the least amount of people? Right? And so I commend you. And I think it's very important to be ethical, especially with your 990s. That's one of the things that I look at. If
Yeah.
somebody comes on board and they're like, hey, I want to collaborate with you, I'm like, all right, that's cool. And before I even talk to them, I go on and I look at their 990s and I look, and there's so many organizations out there that are veteran run organizations for the last 3 years that have not filed their 990s. To me, that's a red flag.
Oh yeah,
Right.
sure. Yep.
And the thing is, you're ethical about it, so you sleep better at night. You feel better about what
Yeah.
you're doing. And so being ethical
Yeah.
on that level makes you just a person with more integrity.
Yeah.
And I only collaborate with businesses or nonprofits in that realm. So I know there's some people that just give and they don't even think about it. They don't even consider it. It's never been in their wheelhouse, or they've never, what's a 990, right? And actually, you've probably seen on the news, there's a couple of nonprofits out there that didn't even know that they had to file 990s, right? So,
Yeah.
so it's crazy because of the back end of all the work. And so I know there's a lot of work that goes in for what you're doing. And I think the numbers are amazing. And it's just that little ripple effect. I think you're smart for doing 1-day retreats. I plan on building a temple up here on our land, a labyrinth and a fire pit. And I plan on doing the same thing. Sunrise to sunset retreats, open up for the community, so you've inspired me to the next level to realize that I can do these 1-day events, that it doesn't have to be like a week-long complete holistic event, that we can just take people out and take them climbing or biking or fishing or hunting or whatever it is. And it's going to make a positive impact, and it's going to have social enrichment in their lives. So once again, man, I'm glad that I was able to just hear your story, because it reignited another fire and hope of confidence of what we're going to do next year for our community. So and there'll probably just be 1 or 2 events, right? But and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like what we can afford and what we can do, and that's it. But if we impact 20, 40, 50 people's lives, then we've done that. We've done our part.
Well, and a rock doesn't get dropped in the pond without having a massive ripple. And you'll be surprised at some of the things that happen, because, I'm sitting in the driveway with my neighbor who's a wine broker. So, we may or may not have had a glass of wine in his driveway, right? And my phone kind of goes, bzz, bzz, and I'm like, well, what's that? Probably shouldn't be looking at my phone. We're supposed to be relaxing, right? But I try to be disconnected, but I couldn't. Anyway, I looked at the phone and it was, it's Jose Flores, and I know who that is. And he's a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, and he happened to be a drill instructor at that moment in time. And when I met him, he was a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps. And he says, hey, Rick, and I won't give you the whole story. You can actually watch it on our website, or you can Google it, Gunnery Sergeant Jose Flores, Soul Survivor Outdoor, and it'll pop up. And he's got about a 7-minute story. And he says, hey, went skydiving with you 2 years ago. Don't know why it's taken me so long to get back in touch with you specifically about that event. But you saved my life that day, and you didn't even know it. And I about fell out of my little lawn chair, because those are the results, or those are the things that you want to hear. Right. Mostly we don't, but I just thought, what? So what you're doing, you get somebody out for the day. In fact, that was the skydiving thing. Sometimes is a 4 or 5 hour evolution from the beginning to the end. So he spent 4 hours with us, and we had a guest speaker. In that case, I think it was somebody from Mighty Oaks, Robert, who shared. And then our volunteers kind of, hey, how you doing? What are you doing? Who are you? Just socializing, like being human. And he said, you poured life into me that day. And then, you saved my life. And so what he really got was about 40 minutes of like pouring life into him. The rest was get in the plane, jump out of the plane, fall to the ground, land safely, get a snack, leave. And you're like, that saved your life? It doesn't take much. It really doesn't, Yeah,
I've been blessed to hear that every single time I lead a retreat.
Yeah.
So for the last 7 years almost, every single week when I'm done with this retreat, and even before that, people will say, you provided a path that I've never been on before. and you
Yeah.
saved my life. And there will be people that go through Warriors of Sin on Wednesday that plan on committing suicide. I've had story after story. They're like, hey, this was the last stop. I've got the gun in my car. I've got the method. And when I left here on Friday, I was going to go commit suicide because I knew there was nothing left. So I've been blessed to hear that for the last 7 years. It gives me a purpose. But what I realize is that if I can provide all of that or a lot of that in one day with an
Yeah.
experience for spiritual enlightenment and a path, that I can impact even more people.
Absolutely, you can. And our viewpoint is, we could camp out on a small group of people and just have them, and that's it for the whole year or something. And that's one approach, and organizations do take that approach, and that's okay for them. For us, we're like, okay, well, let's get one more one more opportunity, because we have soldiers coming up to us yesterday saying, hey, we're really encouraged what you just did today. Can we pray for you? I was like, what? Are you kidding? Yeah, no, you can't. Like, yeah, let's stop and let you pray for us. And I also wanted to say to Kevin, with regard to the veteran thing, you may not have heard this. We have a lot of veterans that are involved in what we're doing, and our volunteers, veteran, active duty, and civilian never served. And we have a pretty healthy mix, which I think is essential so that we don't act too uptight, because Marines can do that, and other service branches can too. But veterans are speaking at our events and telling their stories to the ones currently serving. Jeremy Cole is an Army First Sergeant retired, and he lives outside of Clarksville, Tennessee, and he's running stuff at Fort Campbell, Fort Bragg, Fort Benning, and then jumping around and helping us in other places at times. Tony Smith is a Marine Corps Master Sergeant. He's retired in Georgetown, Texas. He's the one leading the stuff with the soldiers from Fort Hood. And believe it or not, the Marines are getting along great with the Army, Brad Spear, a chaplain who was with the Coast Guard for a couple of years, introduced us to the Coast Guard, who I have the utmost respect for, because their job is just like police and fire every single day. They're not ever training. I mean, they are, but they're not. They're doing it every day. So we have a myriad of people, so there's a lot of room for us to grow, and there's a lot of room for veterans and others to be part of what we're doing. And, just couldn't be more thankful for that opportunity.
Well, your intention drives the scope of any mission. And people can understand your intention, even though you may not always say it. Mm-hmm. They can feel it, right? And that energy, it's proven that you've been in a room where somebody else walks in and the energy goes down. They leave, the energy goes back up, or vice versa. Somebody walks in, the energy goes up, right? Yeah. And they leave, it kind of goes down. And so you bring that type of energy to what you're doing, but your intention is what truly is making that transformation. And that's one of the reasons why people feel that spiritual enlightenment or that spiritual acceptance, or however you want to say it, is because it's the intention of what you're driving. So,
well, I hate to admit it, but sometimes I've been the person who walked into a room and the energy went down. We're all human beings, right? But yeah, along those lines, you talk about the energy and where it comes from and everything. It's like, the world tells us, and this is a big piece, I think, of what we do. And we're not a suicide. If we tie into the suicide thing at all, and there's definitely an epidemic, we are not the suicide prevention organization that would be like, don't kill yourself, and here's a long list of whys. If we were talking about that at all, we'd be saying, don't kill yourself because here are all the reasons you want to live. Not the reasons you don't want to die, but the reasons you want to live. It's a small nuance, but it's a pretty big nuance. And so, the world will tell us that, this is it. When this life is over, I hope you had a good one, but that's the end. And probably evolved or something, but you weren't purposely created. And then so that ends up having us put our identity in all the wrong things, right? Like we put something on our collar, police, fire, military, and we have a rank, and that's our identity. And if it's not that, then it's because we have a master's degree, a PhD, or we have, 15,000 followers, or we whatever, we're really good looking, we're really athletic, all these temporary things and so if we're not created, then we have to figure out a way to be valued, and then those are temporary, and then that goes away, and then now we're really in a rocky place. Jesus said, a sandy place, you built your house on sand, and the storms of life have come in, much like the hurricane in Florida recently. And if the home wasn't well founded, built tightly on concrete and everything, okay, then you got serious problems. It washed out to sea. It was a yard sale. The Bible is very clear. In the beginning, God, you were created. In Jeremiah, it says not only that, but before you even existed before time existed, I thought about you. And my other part of my degree is design. So that means I got to have thought about what that thing's going to look like. And then it's going to be on paper or on computer aided design or something. And then it's going to actually take shape and form. And the Bible actually says that kind of stuff. And then for the warriors, it says God's a mighty warrior, which everyone loves, especially my Viking brethren. They're like, oh yeah, Thor, but then it says some really crazy talk like, he delights in you, he rejoices over you, and he dances and sings over you. And that's where it gets really weird. Like, okay, so God has this amazing thought process about you and says, you know what? When the chips are down and you think you don't matter, you do, not because you say you matter, not because your friend, your relative, your wife, what if you've messed up everything, which some of us have, and God says, no, you matter because I say that you do. No one's ever going to take that away. And not only that, but then the Bible says, I died for you and I raised from the dead for you, and that's a mind-blowing concept, right? Because if we believe that for a second, wait, there's a God of a universe, which we don't even have a concept of what that is, but then he put himself in the form of something like a man or us. We think of ourselves as being so big, it's like, look at the universe. We can't even see us from the other side of the planet, let alone from the other side of the universe. And yet the Bible says, nope, you matter because I say you do. All of humanity actually matters because I say that you do. And that energy, that empowerment, that impact over people's lives, even when they just consider it for a second, they don't even believe it. They're like, I don't know, Rick, is that really true? But maybe I should think about that for a second. That changes everything. Crickets.
Well, I feel like I feel like I talk too much, and I take too much people's time and attention. So it's like I was just pausing, but I mean, you said a lot, and it's amazing just to unpack. But once again, I'll just go back to your intention drives the scope of any mission, and that's what people can see in you is your authenticness, your willingness to be vulnerable, raw, real, and genuine. And so it's nice because if people meet you in person, then they're going to be like, "Here's your money," right? And I think it's the same thing. I mean, I just got a check for $3,500 just now, right before this call, and I was like, this is such a huge blessing, right? Because somebody that I met that I had no idea that would make a contribution, and that's, you can't see your own, you never know your future connections. There's no way we're going to know who we're going to meet in the future, but definitely an inspirational story. Definitely, allows me the opportunity to be like, man, I can do the same thing here in my backyard. I can take people fishing or hunting or rock climbing on little one-day events and transform and save their lives. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
And once again, I appreciate you being authentic and real, and I appreciate you really having integrity, because when you get that kind of money, a lot of times you can hide behind other aspects and concepts like a lot of other people do. And so I can tell by the conversation and who you are that you're not that guy. And so I admire you for that. Well,
thank you very much. I appreciate that feedback.
Rick, I wanted to tell you something. You just kind of struck a chord for me. I've been off my path, what I felt like was my path for a long time. I used to be very involved with a lot of this stuff. I used to run and facilitate some of my own things. And I kind of had a break. You know, I'm not a person of Christian faith
Yeah.
per se. I'm a person of definitely faith and spirituality.
Yep.
And the last straw was, you know, I walked away from two nonprofits and leadership back to back within
Right.
6 months.
Yeah.
And I know it was missing. And I kept asking this question, what is your mission? And they would look
Mhm.
at me with their mouth hanging open, like, what is your mission? What is driving us today? I'd ask my boss, what's your mission? You have to have a personal mission, not just, oh, we're this organization and we want to help vets, but how and why? You know, what's the why?
Yeah.
If we don't have that, is it our faith? Is it our doctrine? What is it? But like, it was missing. And it
Yep.
was just, when you're living that way, it falls apart. And I kept getting my heart broke by these organizations because I just felt like they didn't have a heart in it. And
Yeah.
you would see that at the end of the day
Yep.
with the way things were being handled and how people weren't happy, both volunteers, employees, and the veterans we were serving.
Yeah.
So I'm just glad that you have that piece. And I think now I know what was missing. It wasn't me. I felt like for a long time it was me. Why can't I just be here? Why can't I say I accept this? Why can't I push I believe? What's wrong with me? But maybe that's what was missing, and I couldn't be a part of it no more. So I've
Yeah.
kind of completely stepped away from everything that kind of gave me value, not value, but I have a hard time in finding value myself, like you were talking.
Yeah.
I put value in what I'm doing. Who am I helping?
Yeah.
What did I do today? So
Absolutely.
I think it's beautiful what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. And that's what we do as humans. We want to place our value in, you know, all of our status and, you know, our education or things that are really temporal. And then we don't also, you know, Sarah had asked a question about, you know, what can be learned for others or whatever. And it's like, you know, your individual life can have so much more, you know, impact on, you know, if that's Carrie going out for, you know, a day, you know, your life is having a huge impact on those people that you're with and present with that day. And I just emailed the guy this morning that I was on a call with, and he made some comment, and I said, I don't really understand. I mean, I guess I understand it because we kind of, you know, we can wear masks, right? You know, but what's the point? I mean, you know, what's authentic these days? You know, it's really hard to decipher truth. And, but each of us individually can just be real with people, not build a facade, not build an ivory tower, not, you know, not try to be something that we're not. And people relate to that, you know. We don't have to have the same viewpoint on the world and faith and everything. But if I share my story with you, and you know that I'm real and I don't have an ulterior motive, you know, that changes everything. So who can't do that? And then in my own experience of doing a nonprofit, which in many ways I wouldn't recommend that. It's like, okay, you know, I felt, I guess, called to do it, but there's a part of me that wouldn't want to do it because it's like you need a bankroll. Where's that coming from? And how do you do all that? But you know, we're created, you know, this goes back to the God thing. We're all created for something way bigger than what we realize or intend. You know, I think Jesus used the parable of talents. You know, somebody went off and buried theirs because they were just scared. What would God do, or the owner of the whatever come back if they didn't use them? And then a couple of the others went, you know what? I could do this much with it, or I can do this much with it. But most of us kind of hold it in. And there's just, you know, we're all dynamite, you know, just waiting to get out. So there's a lot of impact that each one of us can have. And that's, you know, when you ask that question, Sarah, I'm like, that's an easy answer. You know, it's not about Soul Survivor Outdoor, though I love what we're doing and I want to keep doing more. What is each one of you doing or capable of doing as well? And then let's go change the world together. So anyway.
Love that. Love that. I mean, it is, there's a plan for each one of us. God, like you were saying, we were created very specifically by him, and that there's a beautiful plan, you know, to live out and to appreciate our strengths. And Janet, you have a comment. I want to get to you before we wrap things up.
Yeah, I just want to say, sorry, Rick, that I'm on a different time zone than last week, and I messed up my time. But what I like what you said is reframing the question about killing yourself. Why do I want to live? And I remember a story that I heard from a suicide hotline. And this guy called in and this woman said to him, is it snowing where you are? And he says, yes. He says, do you have a neighbor maybe that might need help cleaning their sidewalk or something? And he says, yeah. Okay, go shovel their sidewalk and then call me back. And we just need to change that state.
Yeah.
While you're on the phone with them, I want you to write down 5 reasons why you need to live. And it just shifts that mindset, right?
Yeah.
And then I just want to address something that Kevin said. Kevin, I was where this past year has all been about me, about what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And I just did some stuff this past week and last month, and it was like I got back. Somebody had me do something, and it just brought everything back. And I went back to what I said I wanted to do in 2010. But I wasn't living that because I didn't believe I could do that.
Mm.
And thanks to this group, and Carrie, you're one of them that talked when I talked about my journaling, about teaching journaling and stuff. And you have no idea, when I did that presentation in July, that good group and the interest that was there. And now we've got a group going. But it's what we believe, right? We have blinders on in certain areas. And maybe it's just I didn't think I was worthy enough to do it. And so that's where we need this group support and the stories like you did, Rick. And I saw your website there. But it's just, the more we can, even these weekly calls or whatever, the more we can stand up or make somebody laugh. We just came from the bank. We had an appointment, and there was another couple sitting waiting for their appointment, and we're walking around, and we said one comment, then another comment came, and by the time we left, we had the other couple laughing. Now, if you can make somebody laugh today, just one person laugh today, isn't that some good? Right? Because that can be contagious. But it not only feeds their soul, it feeds my soul.
Yeah.
So just like everyone here is doing something, and Kevin, thanks for recognizing it. How many years do we do something? That's why I took retirement in 2011, because I told them, they said, well, work longer, you can get a better pension. I said, I'll die in this job because it was killing me. Mm-hmm. So to recognize and trust that we are doing what we need to do. And you know what? There's always curves in the road or forks in the road. And you know what? When you take a detour, you usually pick up tidbits or find something unique. So that's okay.
Yeah.
So thank you, each and every one of you here, because that's part of, and Sarah for bringing us all together. Blessing.
Oh,
that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Janet. Last thing, I know you're trying to wrap us up, Sarah. You talk about that day you made that phone call, or that time you went to that nonprofit and that day changed your life, or that conversation. I mean, I had one of those moments last week, and it was calling a friend that I hadn't spoke to in probably 1.5 years, 2 years. And it was Sarah. And I was in a pretty bad place. And it took every bit of drive, of motivation, energy, spiritual, whatever, to make that call. And I don't know why it was so hard or why it took so long, but here I am today. It's because of Sarah. And I feel like I can see the path. I'm not on it, but I feel like I can see it again. And I just want to thank Sarah for what she does, for what she has done. She's brought us all together. She's this glue, and she's humble, and she doesn't realize it, but I want to let her know that she's definitely helped me the other day. And I was in a rough spot.
Oh, I appreciate you, Kevin. I was so happy to hear from you and to see you get on this call. It's awesome. It's really awesome. So, well, listen, thank you. And Rick too, this has been really cool. I just appreciate everything that you shared and just who you are and what you're bringing to this conversation. And, one of the thoughts that I'm thinking as I'm kind of wrapping up all the thoughts that everybody has shared is, sometimes we really do underestimate what can happen in a day,
Absolutely.
in a moment, just like you said, in a conversation, making somebody laugh, or, brainstorming, or, I mean, some of the most powerful moments I've had too have just been like one conversation. Or like you said, and Carrie, you can have these wonderful days, and there's so much refreshment that can come in just one day of activities. And I mean, I used to go visit my son in college. I'd drive out and see him. We would have a 3-hour dinner. We would catch up on everything. He played college football, so he was very busy. Never had to worry. I never had to bother him in his schedule. He would just carve out 3 hours for dinner, have a wonderful catch up time. So refreshing, stay the night and then drive home. And, there's so much that can happen with just being present, and love what you're doing, Rick. And I really appreciate all your comments too. It's so good to see everybody. So any last words, comments, Rick?
Well, I just thank you so much for being able to be on here, and each one of you, and your input and feedback, and challenge you to, I think probably the worst thing about the last couple of years that we lived through with COVID and everything is just that, I think humans are inclined to be afraid to do stuff anyway, and then that just kind of lumps some more fear on top of everything. And I experience fear. There's sometimes I do stuff. I might go climb a rock because I'm scared. So I need to build those muscles to not. So the challenge of not letting the fear deter you from the direction that you think that you need to be going. There is healthy fear, and there is discernment about doing things, but don't let fear be the primary motivation of why you either do or do not do something. And then, selfish plug, yes, please, check out our website, soulsurvivoroutdoor.org, and soul is SOUL. We're on Instagram, SSO_outdoor. We are on Facebook. You can just simply, search Soul Survivor Outdoor. You'll see our page there too. And you get to see the stuff that's going on and some of the inspiration that occurs and whatnot. And y'all can reach out to me individually too. Happy to talk to y'all. And Sarah, just thank you so much for the opportunity to share about what we're doing, and keep us in prayer, that we can keep doing what we're doing. The doors seem wide open, and we want to keep doing it.
It's been a pleasure, Rick. Thank you.